If you want to be remembered as a brave and talented actor, you might have to eat a few bugs. These performers are willing to get down and dirty for the sake of art, and some of them even earned Oscars for their efforts. Star Trek is full of intergalactic delicacies, from blue squids to Klingon garg. Oftentimes, the actors are really eating regular Earth food colored to look like alien cuisine. Other times, it's not actually food at all, but something much worse. Such was the case in the 1988 Star Trek The Next Generation episode Conspiracy, which had the ship's crew taken over by mind-controlling insect creatures. During a climactic scene, several possessed officers sit around a table, reveling in their new alien forms and eating bowls of living worms. Although some fans initially insisted that the actors were filmed eating chow mein or some other form of worm-like food. Others argued that Jonathan Frakes, who played Commander Riker, actually swallowed a creepy crawly.
Eat hearty, brother. Relish in your body.
In a 1996 interview with Entertainment Weekly, Frakes set the record straight. Asked to name his favorite Klingon dish, he replied, "I like garg, and I once ate a live grub worm in a Star Trek episode." Unfortunately, the scene in which he actually swallowed the grub didn't make it to air. That wasn't the only gross thing Frakes did for Trek. As he later revealed in the documentary Journey's End, he volunteered to swim in a pool of metamucil and black printer ink for the Season 1 episode Skin of Evil. Bishop, a synthetic officer on the USS Sulaco, is one of the most memorable characters introduced in James Cameron's Aliens. Actor Lance Henriksen had to risk life and limb to play the part. He put his fingers and Bill Paxton's in danger for the famous knife trick scene, but the real damage to his body came during the climactic showdown with the Xenomorph Queen. Just when the heroes think the coast is clear, Bishop is impaled by the Queen's tail and gets torn in half. Fake blood is usually made from corn syrup and food dye, but android blood in the Alien universe is white and milky. It only made sense to use milk as an ingredient while making it.
They had milk and yogurt mixed up, and they had it sitting in cups, for me to puke all over the place.
Unfortunately for Henriksen, there was something the crew didn't account for while filming.
The stuff went bad, and man, boy, did I get sick. I had food poisoning from it.
The spoiled mixture was swapped out with fresh yogurt once the crew realized just how sick Henriksen had become. Joe's Apartment isn't a movie that people tend to remember very fondly, if they remember it at all. For some reason, people didn't flock to theaters to see a guy hang out with talking bugs, cockroaches to be exact. Joey O'Connell stars as a New York City newcomer who moves into an apartment with thousands of tiny roommates. Unfortunately for both him and them though, a few of them end up in his cereal. While special effects had to be used to make the roaches sing and dance, they couldn't fake O'Connell putting them in his mouth. Actually, they very much could have, but they didn't, as O'Connell revealed in a 1996 interview. They were going to use computer-generated roaches, and I said to the director, it would be really freaky if I put 2 live ones in my mouth. I know if I were to see this film, that would be something I'd like to see. He revealed that it took 4 or 5 takes to nail the shot, joking, "My only concern was that the roaches were going to lay eggs in my mouth. Oh, and roach breath." Luckily for O'Connell, he didn't actually have to swallow any insects. But is putting cockroaches in your mouth and spitting them out over and over again really any better? Sam Raimi is known by many as the man behind the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, but to horror heads, he's a living legend. His Evil Dead trilogy put Bruce Campbell through the ringer, but Alison Lohman took on the role of ever-suffering protagonist for 2009's Drag Me to Hell. In what's perhaps the meanest movie in Raimi's filmography, Lohman stars as a bank manager named Christine, who has a curse placed on her by a disgruntled old woman after denying her a mortgage extension. Christine endures all sorts of disgusting trials throughout the film's 99 minutes, but the grossest moment of all is definitely when she's visited by a demon who pukes maggots into her mouth. Even though it ends up being a dream sequence, Lohman very much had to do it for real. Yes, those are real maggots, but Lohman, ever the professional, agreed to film the scene as authentically as possible.
Well, it was fine until Sam asked me to open my mouth. That was kind of disgusting.
If there's any lesson to be learned from the 1982 horror classic Poltergeist, it's that you probably shouldn't desecrate human remains. After all, the entire Freeling family nearly gets sent to the other side after they move into a house built on top of a Native American burial ground. Unfortunately for JoBeth Williams, who played concerned mother Diane Freeling, the Poltergeist crew didn't seem to internalize that lesson. During the film's third act climax, Diane falls into a muddy pit and screams as she sees skeletons rise to the surface around her. The bones are pretty realistic, which makes sense because they used to belong to very real people. Williams had no idea that they were authentic until years later. As she told Vanity Fair, "I always assumed that the skeletons were made by the prop department. A few years later, I ran into one of the special effects guys, and I said, 'You guys making all those skeletons, that must have been really amazing.' He said, 'Oh, we didn't make them. Those were real.'" Looking to see something truly filthy? Look no further than the filmography of John Waters. Dubbed the Pope of Trash by both his fans and detractors, Baltimore's favorite son has made some of the grossest, most entertaining movies you'll ever see. His most memorable efforts were his collaborations with the drag queen Divine. And while Female Trouble and Polyester broke new ground in the field of nauseating cinema, none of Waters' films have a more infamous reputation than Pink Flamingos. Divine stars as the so-called filthiest person alive, but a nauseating arms race ensues when a rival couple tries to take the title for themselves.
Could you give us some of your political beliefs?
Kill everyone now. Condone first-degree murder. Advocate cannibalism. Eat.
The last part is no exaggeration. In one of the most shocking moments ever filmed for a theatrical release, Divine eats dog poop off the ground. For real, it's not even part of the story either, it's just tacked on at the end of the film. If that's not proof of being the filthiest person, nothing is. Waters reflected on the moment during an interview with Rolling Stone, saying, "It's one of the most famous scenes I ever shot. Certainly no one ever tried to do it again. No special effects, it was real, and it frightens people to this day." Waters insisted that Divine didn't swallow, but admitted that swishing it around like mouthwash wasn't really any less gross. Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Andy Serkis, Doug Jones. Some people were born to play monsters on the big screen. Kane Hodder isn't as big a name as those four, but he'll always have a place in horror history as the man who brought Jason Voorhees to life for several Friday the 13th movies. One lesser-known film that Hodder contributed to is 1987's Prison, directed by Die Hard 2 helmer Rennie Harlin and co-starring a young Viggo Mortensen. During one scene in the film, Hodder filled his mouth with giant worms, West African night crawlers to be exact. As he explained, "There was a scene toward the end of the movie where my character comes up through the ground. They were putting dirt all over me, and also worms. Big, live night crawlers. That was so there would be some of them squirming around on my body when I stood up and screamed." Hodder wasn't satisfied just to be covered in bugs, continuing, "I came up with the suggestion to put some of those worms in my mouth, because I thought it would be good for them to come squirming out of my mouth when I started screaming. So we did it, and it repulsed most everybody on the crew. But to me, it wasn't a big deal. The worms were trying to get out, and I was trying to hold them in until the cameras rolled." How do you shed your image as a vampire heartthrob and become one of the most promising actors of your generation? If you ask Robert Pattinson, the answer is to take on as many wild and offbeat projects as possible, and do some funny voices in the process.
Basically, all I want to do is stuff that's really, really weird and crazy.
Good Time and High Life were turning points for the former Twilight star, but his status as art house darling was fully solidified with Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse in 2019. Pattinson shares the screen with Willem Dafoe as the two descend into madness on an isolated island, and he was apparently willing to do anything for the part.
What?
Pattinson relished the opportunity to lose his sanity on film and went to great lengths to get into character. He told Esquire, "Because you're playing a mad person, it means you can sort of be mad the whole time. I spent so much time making myself throw up, my pants. It's the most revolting thing. I don't know, maybe it's really annoying." Neither Eggers nor Dafoe seemed to have any complaints, but even though many critics hailed Pattinson's Lighthouse performance as a career best for the actor, we wouldn't recommend going that far should you find yourself on a film set. When young Anne Hathaway dreamed a dream of being a famous movie star and winning an Academy Award, it probably didn't involve her sitting in fish carcasses. Nevertheless, she was dedicated enough to do so when she played the role of Fantine in Tom Hooper's big screen adaptation of Les Miserables. It's a relatively brief part, but it's one of the most important. Fantine loses her job and falls into ruin after knowledge of her illegitimate daughter comes to light, singing one of the musical's most iconic numbers before dying. Hathaway's rendition of I Dreamed a Dream was so heart-wrenching that it pretty much won her the Oscar on its own, and she sang it while she was surrounded by rotting fish. Hooper insisted on doing live recordings for everything too, so she couldn't just lip-sync it and use a studio recording instead. Hathaway's co-star Eddie Redmayne told the Huffington Post in 2012, "On the set where Annie Hathaway did I Dreamed a Dream, there were thousands of rotting fish corpses and the place stunk to high heaven." English icon Gary Oldman went decades without an Academy Award, and he finally got one for playing Winston Churchill in the biopic Darkest Hour. So, how does an actor as talented as him get inside the mind of the man who guided Britain through World War II? One of the ways Oldman did so was matching his love of cigars, until he went so far overboard with the habit that it made him physically ill. Because Churchill was famously known for chomping on a stogie, a cigar was a must for Oldman to get into character, and he was apparently unwilling to use a prop or fake. He reportedly smoked more than 400 cigars during filming, at a total cost of $20,000 and his physical health. Oldman told The Hollywood Reporter, "I got serious nicotine poisoning. It wasn't because he loved smoking them and that he had so many though. It was because of the rigors and idiosyncrasies of filming." Oldman continued, "You'd have a cigar that was 3/4 smoked and you'd light it up, and then over the course of a couple of takes, it would go down, and then the prop man would replenish me with a new cigar. We were doing that for 10 or 12 takes a scene." Remember the 2011 film Rampart? If you do, it's probably because of an infamously disastrous Reddit AMA that star Woody Harrelson took part in during its promotional cycle. Not a lot of people are actually interested in seeing a gritty depiction of a real-life police corruption scandal, but supporting actor Ben Foster treated his role like it was his ticket to Oscar Gold. He basically went full method for the part, which just so happened to be that of a homeless man who witnesses a murder. To prepare, Foster spent time living on the streets of Los Angeles, dirty and disheveled, and he did some pretty gross stuff to feel like he was really living it. In an interview with GQ, Foster revealed that he lived alongside other homeless people, saying, "I was my pants like everyone else." Definitely too much information, but proof positive that Hollywood actors are their own unique breed. For his part, Foster wasn't exactly rewarded for his dedication. Rampart wasn't even able to crack $1 million at the box office. If we told you that an actor had to have their eyes glued shut for a role, you'd probably guess that it was for a horror movie like Saw. On the contrary, Jamie Foxx did exactly that for a music biopic of all things, and he won an Academy Award for doing so. Foxx was cast as the blind soul legend Ray Charles in Taylor Hackford's film Ray. And if you watch the two side by side, the resemblance is uncanny. Foxx didn't achieve that just by closing his eyes and putting on shades. He did so by having a pair of fake eyelids glued onto him, forcing him to work without sight himself. It wasn't without side effects, as Foxx ended up revealing that he had more than one panic attack, as he said to the New York Times. "Imagine having your eyes glued shut for 14 hours a day. That's your jail sentence." The rest of the crew would frequently need to be reminded that Foxx couldn't see, as it'd often leave the actor sitting alone without realizing he couldn't get around without help. Is all that worth it for the chance to win an Oscar? You be the judge. Malcolm McDowell has played literally hundreds of roles throughout his storied career. The most famous of all came in 1971 when he played Alex DeLarge in Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Whether he's having a drink at the milk bar or building up his fellow Drews, Alex has no shortage of iconic moments. One of them takes place later on in the movie, when he agrees to be the subject of an experimental brainwashing procedure called the Ludovico technique. His eyes are held open and he's forced to watch videos of atrocities set to his favorite music. McDowell was supposed to receive frequent eye drops during the filming of the scene, but the doctor administering them got distracted after Kubrick gave him a line. The actor told The Guardian in 2024, "I did scratch my corneas. My eyes are anesthetized, so I couldn't feel those lid locks scraping down my eyes. Things really got bad once McDowell was off the clock." He continued, "I was home an hour later when the anesthetic wore off, and I've never felt pain like it. My own doctor came around and gave me a shot of morphine in my ass. Thankfully, there wasn't any lasting damage."
I'm cured! Praise God!
When it comes to Korean cinema, no film has a reputation quite like Oldboy. Park Chan-wook's 2003 thriller set a new standard for violent anti-hero protagonists and minted the trend one-take hallway fight scenes. Choi Min-Sik stars as Odesu, a man kidnapped and held in solitary confinement by an anonymous mastermind. When he's freed after 15 years, Daesu wages a one-man war as he seeks revenge against his captor. But when the truth comes to light, everything changes forever. Min-Sik dedicated himself fully to becoming Daesu during his descent into insanity, and is said to have lost and gained weight before and during filming to portray his starving character. In one noteworthy scene, Daesu wakes up outside for the first time in a decade and a half and proceeds to enter a sushi restaurant. He orders a live octopus and consumes it on camera. No CGI trickery here. Min-Sik really ate a living cephalopod. He ate 4, in fact. Apparently, one take wasn't enough. It's a shocking moment for sure, but if you can believe it, it's not even the grossest thing in the movie. If you know, you know. Would it surprise you to learn that a movie based on the works of Stephen King forced an actor to do something disgusting and miserable? Probably not. The events of King's novel It actually had to be toned down a bit for the 2-part adaptation from the late 2010s, but that didn't stop director Andy Muschietti from getting Jessica Chastain to spend an entire day submerged in a viscous soup of fake blood. Called the bloodiest horror scene ever by IndieWire, the sequence involved 3 different sets and 4,500 gallons of simulated plasma. Production designer Paul Austerberry revealed, "It was an elevated reservoir, and the pipes were keyed into the flooding tank. It didn't just fill into the set, it went around it too, so the pressure was even as the blood rose up." Since it was filmed in Toronto, its Chapter 2 required so much fake blood that it had to be brought in by a truck from Los Angeles. That much red stuff doesn't just run like a river through the Great White North the way it does in Hollywood. Worse yet is that the sequence didn't initially go well, requiring cinematographer Checo Varesa to climb into the vat with Chastain. Ultimately, the pair spent nearly an entire day engulfed in the stuff, which wasn't exactly fun.
I fully went in the blood, which I regretted a lot afterwards.
As is the case with any profession involving physical interaction with other people, it's not uncommon to get sick on a film set. Maybe there's a bug going around, or maybe the catering is so bad that it gave a bunch of people food poisoning, like what happened during the making of Total Recall. Some incidents can't be avoided, which makes the ailments caused by preventable mistakes even more upsetting. Case in point, Halloween 2, the one from 1981, not the Rob Zombie one. Pamela Susan Shoop, who played Nurse Bailey, had to be submerged underwater for a sexy scene that turns deadly when she's drowned in a hot tub by Michael Myers. Even though the water in the scene is depicted as scalding hot, it was actually ice cold and dirty to boot. Shoop's teeth kept chattering as she got repeatedly pushed under the surface, and she left set that day with a severe ear infection. That's not all. Shoop also claimed that the process used to dress her up for her beauty scenes left her hair damaged for a long time after the film wrapped. A cult favorite B-movie star, the late Joe Pilato, made his screen debut in George Romero's 1978 horror classic, Dawn of the Dead, before graduating to a leading role in the 1985 follow-up, Day of the Dead. While he had little to do in Dawn as an unnamed cop, Pilato had more substantial screen time in Day as Captain Rhodes, the perfectly hateable military commander who leads a group of survivors in an underground bunker. Now that he had a much bigger role, Pilato couldn't just stand around watching other actors doing disgusting things. He had to get gross himself, and that meant being covered in fermented animal guts. For the scene in which Captain Rhodes is brutally torn apart by zombies, real animal entrails were used to simulate human flesh and innards instead of latex, rubber, and jelly. Pilato was placed into a hole in the floor so an artificial body could be constructed around him, filled with organs and guts from a dead cow. Years later, while appearing at a convention, Pilato was asked about the animal parts and responded, "I can still smell them to this day." As gruesome as it sounds, and it is gruesome, animal guts are a tried and true substitute for human entrails in the world of horror media. The mother of all zombie movies, Night of the Living Dead, utilized a similar yet singularly gross method. During one infamous scene, a truck explodes and leaves the remains of its human passengers scattered about, the perfect meal for the nearby undead. The sickening scene sees the zombies chowing down on human flesh, an effect achieved by using real sheep hearts, lungs, and intestines that the zombie actors ate up like candy. The guts were supplemented by ham, as well as syrup to simulate blood. but the animal parts were provided by a friend of the production who happened to own a meatpacking plant. To give them an even more realistic look and feel, the various sheep organs were filled with water, making them slimy and jelly-like. In the words of co-screenwriter and zombie actor John Russo, "It was bizarre, like a Fellini movie or something." Getting actors to eat bugs and animal guts is disgusting enough on its own, but asking a vegetarian to do so is a hell of a request. Unfortunately for Mia Farrow, the production of Rosemary's Baby brought her and her character to hell and back. Roman Polanski is most infamous nowadays for his offset actions, but he wasn't exactly a forgiving director while he was helming the now classic horror movie. His borderline abusive treatment of Farrow during production is well documented. One of the grossest examples of this came when Polanski forced Farrow to eat raw chicken liver for the sake of a scene. Granted, Farrow didn't exactly push back. In her memoir, What Falls Away, she revealed, "When Roman wanted me to eat raw liver, I ate it take after take, even though at the time I was a committed vegetarian." There are plenty of adventurous omnivores out there who refuse to put raw liver anywhere near their mouths, but Farrow felt compelled to go the extra mile anyway. There has long been talk of Halle Berry going to extraordinary lengths to get into character as Vivian alongside Samuel L. Jackson in Jungle Fever, Spike Lee's 1991 exploration of romance and race relations. Jackson portrayed the scene-stealing, drug-addled brother of Wesley Snipes' lead character named Gator, while Berry was Gator's hard-scrabble main squeeze. Jungle Fever features a memorable scene that called for Jackson and Berry to bicker back and forth when Gator wants some alone time with his brother. For Berry, who came from the world of modeling, it was an unexpected role, and one she had worked hard to land. To prepare for the part, she spent several weeks not bathing, with most reports claiming that she went unwashed for 2 weeks. Some even speculated that her avoidance of soap and water went as long as 2 months. In 2012, the Oscar winner told talk show host Wendy Williams that the method tale was no exaggeration, claiming to have avoided bathing for about 10 days. She said, "It's true, ask Sam Jackson. He had to get a whiff of it constantly." Berry elaborated in a 2016 interview, saying, "Spike Lee wanted me to read for a different role, and I read that part fine enough. But then I said to Spike, you know, I really am eyeing this crack hoe role. It was an amazing way to start my career." Yes, the rumors are true. Nicolas Cage ate cockroaches. Cast in the role of Peter Lowe, a literary agent suffering from paranoid delusions in the 1989 horror comedy Vampire's Kiss, Cage was a fast-rising Hollywood star at the time. He was known for taking daring risks and making, let's call them, unique choices in his mannerisms. In the years since, the box office flop has become a cult hit, as well as a dependable Halloween watch. Kiss also offers viewers a chance to watch the actor do some off-the-wall things, from falling downstairs to tearing a room apart to screaming the alphabet in its entirety, jumping on desks, chasing pigeons, and pouring hot yogurt on his toes. The odd performance has since fed multiple memes and is considered a landmark in the cinematic evolution of Cage, perhaps the most interesting actor of his generation. To convincingly portray Lowe's spiraling descent into insanity, Cage made a habit of offering to do more than what was being asked of him. For one scene in particular, though the script only called for Lowe to slurp down a raw egg, Cage felt more was needed. Speaking to The Ringer in 2019 about the infamous movie moment, director Robert Bierman recalled that day on set. He shared, "Nicolas Cage said to me, the thing I hate most in the world are cockroaches. So let me eat a cockroach. I thought, this is terrific. I sent my prop people down into the boiler room. They brought me a box, divided up into little sections with tissue paper. The cockroaches were there, lined up for me to cast. I think they're actually called water bugs. They're bigger than cockroaches."
I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to.
Major spoilers for the 2014 murder mystery thriller Gone Girl. If you've seen the film, you'll know the gruesome final act that Rosamund Pike must perform as Amy Dunn, jilted lover and missing person. After attempting to escape her apparently abusive and unfaithful husband Nick, played by Ben Affleck, Amy hides out with another formerly abusive ex-boyfriend, Desi. She makes the world believe she has disappeared while knowingly implicating Nick in the process. The film follows Nick's attempts to clear his name and find his wife, with Amy being revealed as a ruthless, cunning woman out to destroy her husband's life. In the film's climax, Amy decides to return to Nick and is forced to murder Desi and frame him for a disappearance so she and her husband can live happily ever after. Actress Rosamund Pike was required to believably slice the throat of actor Neil Patrick Harris, who played Desi. It was a key scene that she wanted to be prepared for, so she did what any reasonable person would. She got a hold of some pig carcasses and pretended to murder them. The actress told Collider in 2016, "If you're going to do something like that, you have to do it with a certain degree of accuracy. I had no idea how much force you needed to slice someone's throat. I actually went to a butcher and asked them if they wouldn't mind me just using a box cutter on a pig carcass, just to understand what it would be like." Matt Damon was nothing if not dedicated when he took on the role of Max DaCosta, a blue-collar worker in a dystopian future version of Los Angeles in the 2013 film Elysium. The movie was a much-anticipated follow-up to director Neil Blomkamp's indie hit District 9. With Elysium, Blomkamp took the formula that worked so well before. This included its social commentary, and dialed it up a notch, adding a bigger budget, bigger sets, and bigger stars like Damon and Jodie Foster. But that expanded effects budget didn't mean the entire movie would be filmed on green screen. So to portray Los Angeles in a future where pollution, overpopulation, and climate change had ravaged the landscape, producers used a garbage dump in Mexico City as a stand-in. At San Diego Comic-Con in 2012, Damon spoke to the curious crowd and told them about filming the sci-fi epic, and how the landfill location was mostly fecal matter. The helicopters would come through and would be black with dust. Neil would come over with his mask and said, "I promise you, the photography looks great." Filming for the 2015 Alejandro Iñárritu wilderness epic The Revenant was notoriously difficult. The director himself called the production's harsh conditions a nightmare. Filmed on location in the Canadian Rockies, the crew dealt with bitterly cold temperatures that made production difficult. And Iñárritu was heavily criticized for pushing his cast and crew too hard under harsh conditions in a shoot that went at least 5 months over schedule. Some crew members reportedly ranked it among the worst experiences of their career. One cast member who didn't complain, however, was lead Leonardo DiCaprio. To get into character and deliver his gut-wrenching performance, DiCaprio, known for going above and beyond for his films, went to extreme lengths that included sleeping in animal carcasses and eating raw bison liver. He shared in a 2015 interview, "Whether it's going in and out of frozen rivers or sleeping in animal carcasses or what I ate on set, I was enduring freezing cold and possible hypothermia constantly. I certainly don't eat raw bison liver on a regular basis. When you see the movie, you'll see my reaction to it because Alejandro kept it in. It says it all, it was an instinctive reaction." For the effort, Iñárritu would become just the third director to win back-to-back Academy Awards for Best Director, while DiCaprio would take home his first Best Actor trophy. Based on the smash hit comic book by Todd McFarlane, 1997 Spawn is infamously remembered today for its over-the-top, sometimes silly tone, but the cast was certainly taking it seriously. John Leguizamo's character, for instance, appears as a nauseating, bulbous street punk in bizarre facial makeup, whose disgust for humans is rivaled only by an appetite for all things horrifying. In one scene, the character eats a pizza covered with live maggots. Like some other instances above, this immediately led to a debate among viewers about how real the scene actually was. Eventually, the conversation got so loud that the actor himself had to respond. He tweeted in 2014, "Yes, I did eat maggots in Spawn, but I only swallowed a few." He followed it up by warning his fans not to try it at home. He said, "Haha, don't go there." Shia LaBeouf has earned the reputation of a Hollywood eccentric, and in the right hands, this can sometimes translate to powerful on-screen work. This was the case when his talents were tested in David Ayer's acclaimed 2014 World War II picture, Fury. Along with much of the cast, LaBeouf took part in several weeks of military boot camp alongside a group of Navy SEALs. Star Brad Pitt said, "It was set up to break us down, to keep us cold, to keep us exhausted, to make us miserable, to keep us wet, make us eat cold food." But LaBeouf, who played a tank gunner in the film, took his method performance one step further, going so far as to having one of his teeth removed. He explained on Jimmy Kimmel Live that it wasn't as easy as one might think, saying, "It's not like you can go to some dentist and go in there like, 'Hey, I want to get this tooth taken out.' They were like, 'You want to do what?' That doesn't make any medical sense at all." But ultimately, LaBeouf insists that he got it done because he wanted to add some depth to the character. He added, "I found a guy in Reseda next to a Radio Shack. He didn't ask too many questions. To further method this madness, Fury co-star Logan Lerman told an interviewer that the scar on LaBeouf's cheek in the film was not only real, but self-inflicted. Lerman explained, "They were putting cuts on Shia, and I said, yeah, it looks good." And Shia was like, "No, it doesn't look real." So he walks out into the hallway and says, "Hey man, wanna see something fun? Check this out." And he takes out a knife and cuts his face. For the whole movie, he kept opening these cuts on his face. That's all real. Among the most intensely dedicated actors in Hollywood today, Christian Bale always finds a way to stand out. He notoriously lost 60 pounds for the 2004 flick The Machinist, then immediately bulked up to play Batman. For the Werner Herzog Vietnam War drama Rescue Dawn, Bale combined these methods and more. Taking on the role of real-life war hero and US Navy pilot Dieter Dengler, Bale committed himself fully to embodying the part of the long-suffering hostage of the Pathet Lao. Tortured and starved, the movie portrays Dengler's struggle to endure his captivity, staying alive for his ultimate rescue by American forces. Bale once again put his heart and soul into a part, challenging himself both physically and mentally during the shoot. These adversities included wrestling a real snake, losing more than 60 pounds, and being physically abused as part of several torture scenes. But perhaps most nauseating, Bale ate live maggots in an attempt to portray the depths of desperation his real-life character had reached during imprisonment. He said in a 2007 interview, "Oh yeah, those were real maggots. They were very real. I didn't mind eating the maggots." Asked what he wouldn't do, the actor remarked that being set ablaze is something that crosses the line. "Look, I've done other things where people have to be set on fire and jump through stories. I'm not doing that. I've got limits."
What's the difference between you and me?
I'm not wearing hockey pads.
The late great Tony Todd had multiple iconic supporting roles over the years, in movies like Platoon and Night of the Living Dead. But it's as part as the titular horror villain in the 1992 film Candyman that became his calling card. His booming voice terrified moviegoers in multiple films, and has haunted dreams for over 30 years.
You're mine now.
But it was more than Todd's imposing deep voice, towering physical presence, and razor-sharp hook that scared viewers. The franchise has depicted swarms of bees crawling out of him, from his sleeves, his chest, and even his mouth. And keep in mind that in the early 90s, CGI was a costly, rarely utilized option for horror films. As a result, swarms of real bees were used on set, and Todd endured it all, receiving more than 20 bee stings during the shoot. But don't feel too bad for the thespian. He made a smart deal with the film's producers that ended up putting some good money in his pocket. Alongside all that calamine lotion, he told Entertainment Weekly while looking back on the film in 2019, "I negotiated a bonus of $1,000 for every sting during the bee scene, and I got stung 23 times. Everything that's worth making has to involve some sort of pain. Once I realized it was an important part of who Candyman was, I embraced it. It was like putting on a beautiful coat." The 2012 movie The Paperboy didn't make many waves with critics or at the box office, but at the time of its release, the film was nonetheless discussed, albeit for all the wrong reasons. Set in 1969, Paperboy tells the tale of a reporter who goes back to his childhood hometown to prove the innocence of a death row inmate found guilty of murdering the local sheriff. Matthew McConaughey plays the intrepid reporter, but a tawdry secondary story involves the film's other two leads. Zac Efron plays his younger brother, Jack, and Nicole Kidman plays an out-of-towner named Charlotte Bless, girlfriend of the accused. One scene in the film has Efron's character getting badly injured and stung by a group of jellyfish. As pop culture of the last few decades would have you believe, there's only one way to overcome such pain, and that's by having someone give you an impromptu golden shower. According to the Cleveland Clinic, this is indeed just a myth, so please don't pee on friends and family without first consulting a doctor. For the scene in question, Kidman actually urinated on Zac Efron. Director Lee Daniels said in a 2012 interview, "We just went for it and never thought twice about it because it made sense for the film. It was what it was." As the flick made its way through post-production, Daniels began getting doubts, but Oscar winner Kidman encouraged him to stick by his instincts. Daniels recalled, "I think that I became more nervous about it in the edit room, and I thought, I'm not actually going to show this, right? Is it vulgar? And I called Nicole and said, I don't know. And she said, Lee, you made me pee on Zac Efron. If you don't put it in the movie, you need to man up. And I was like, all right. Joaquin Phoenix is known for his eccentric ways, throwing himself into films like Joker and I'm Still Here. For Paul Thomas Anderson's 2012 film The Master, however, Phoenix may have gone to his most extreme. Portraying Freddie Quell, a veteran of the Second World War suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, Phoenix got very method, so much so that he even wired parts of his jaw shut so he could achieve the character's awkward speech patterns. It's a movie somewhat reminiscent of how method hero Marlon Brando used cotton balls to land the role of Don Corleone, but it also made for a wholly unique performance, one that landed Phoenix an Oscar nomination. Phoenix explained the story in 2014, saying, "My dad sometimes would talk out to the side. He'd clench down one side of his mouth, and I just thought it represented tension in this way, somebody that's just blocked and tight. So I actually went to my dentist and I had them fasten these metal brackets to my teeth on the top and the bottom, and then I wrapped rubber bands around it to force my jaw shut on one side." Phoenix went on to explain, "After a couple weeks, the bands, they weren't really strong enough to kind of hold it, so I ended up getting rid of the rubber bands, and I still had these metal brackets in, and so it made me constantly aware of my cheek. You know, they had these pointy tips so they'd tear up the cheek a little bit." Tim Burton's Batman Returns had some unsettling moments, many of them belonging to Danny DeVito's Penguin. His grotesque appearance and disgusting eating habits made it a bit unpleasant if you were attempting to chow down on a tub of popcorn. But it was the eating habits of the other villain that makes this list, in particular an infamous scene involving a little birdie. During the scene in question, the villainous Catwoman puts a live bird in her mouth as a way of threatening DeVito's Penguin. Actress Michelle Pfeiffer, who would beat out the likes of Sean Young and Madonna for the in-demand part, was determined to do more than simply toss a rubber prop in her mouth and call it a day. Instead, the actress wanted the full effect, particularly the bird fleeing the coop when she opened her mouth, and actually put a real live bird in her mouth for the scene.
Nice birdie.
These days, after special effects and CG have spent decades rendering audiences accustomed to cinematic trickery, you might not appreciate the lengths Pfeiffer went to for the scene unless you know the backstory. Burton told The Hollywood Reporter in 2017, "I don't think I've ever been so impressed. She had a live bird in her mouth while the camera was rolling. It was 4 or 5 seconds, and then she let it fly out. It was before CG. It was before digital. It was so quick. It seems like it was an effect." Pfeiffer said of the scene, "I look back and say, what was I thinking? I could have gotten a disease or something from having a live bird in my mouth. It seemed fine at the time. I don't think the bird was drugged or anything. We did that scene in one take."